What kind of race did Hamilton do in today's sprint race in China? He brought home an extraordinary victory with excellent tyre management and proved to be a 7-time world champion, which he really is. In short, he brought home his first victory in a sprint race, and so we saw a good side of Ferrari in tyre management, and on the other hand, we saw Ferrari in qualifying a bit more in difficulty. In today's video, we'll do a detailed analysis, but first, please like, subscribe, and enable notifications, so you don't miss any videos from this channel. 11 sprint race victories for Verstappen, 2 for Bottas, 2 for Piastri, 1 for Russell, 1 for Perez, 1 for Norris, and today came the first sprint race victory for Lewis Hamilton with a great race, excellent tyre management, especially in the second part of the race, where he made the difference over Piastri and Verstappen, because in the first part, Verstappen was attached to Hamilton. There were moments when he dropped under a second in the drag reduction system zone. It seemed like he could attack. Verstappen couldn't match the English driver. In fact, he got a little greedy, if we want, and he consumed a bit too much. He said not too much the front tires, which were anyway finished, but also the rear, the left rear as well as the left front, where there was a marked graining. Piastri then managed to pass Verstappen at the end of the race because we still saw a strong McLaren on the race pace, but Ferrari held up well and did a great job managing the tyres, especially Hamilton in the second part of the race, but also Leclerc because Hamilton won second, Piastri third, Verstappen fourth, Russell, but Leclerc finished fifth, nearly overtaking Russell on the final lap but fell short. Nevertheless, Ferrari demonstrated excellent tyre management. 6th Tsunoda, 7th Kimi, 8th Norris, who is a bit of the disappointment of the sprint race if we want, and also of the qualifications because he arrived behind his teammate. I want to show you the start, and let's analyze together the sprint race, and then let's also look at the times. So at the start, we saw a great start from Lewis, who immediately took the inside. You see here it seemed that Verstappen could attack Hamilton from the inside, but he didn't leave him room to attack. In this case, Leclerc also tried on Piastri, even going on the curb. You see there at that moment, unfortunately, he did not manage to attack, and then he also lost the position on Russell, and that is a shame because then he had to recover. In my opinion, Leclerc could also perhaps even reach the podium area, but he lost position on Russell and there wasted a lot of time. Here, we also see a very bad start from Norris, who slipped far behind and was unable to recover. A sign that Norris is still very fragile as a driver to fight for a championship. You see that he makes mistakes at decisive moments when he himself has the best car on the grid. Let's underline and say it because Piastri, on the other hand, manages to perform well. Perhaps even more could be done with a Verstappen if Verstappen were to drive the McLaren, but still Piastri manages to deliver solid performances. While Norris makes some mistakes, it's also true that Piastri made a mistake in Australia. We've said it. Norris, on the other hand, didn't make a mistake there, but Norris should have more experience than Piastri. He should make fewer mistakes, and this one today from Spring 3 was a pretty serious mistake from my point of view. Let's look at Piastri's overtake on Verstappen. We see here that the overtake is a brake on the inside. Let's analyze Hamilton, Verstappen, and Piastri's performance first, then we'll examine the differences between drivers within the same team. So, we see that in the first laps, the pace was very similar. In fact, Hamilton even went slower compared to, for example, Piastri and also to Verstappen himself. But then Hamilton managed to be more consistent in the second part of the race. And look at the last 5 laps. The last 5 laps is something sensational. You see that Hamilton manages to recover a lot and go much faster compared to Verstappen and Piastri, who were certainly also in their own battle. So they also suffered from that problem, if we want, in the lap time. But anyway, Hamilton made the difference. Excellent race and tyre management by Lewis. At one point, I thought Verstappen would get within drag reduction system range and attack Hamilton, leaving him vulnerable. Instead, the excellent top speed of Ferrari, combined with Hamilton's excellent tyre management, allowed the English driver to stay up front and carry on. To home the victory, I also want to show you the difference in lap times between Leclerc and Russell in the battle for 4th place, which then went to the advantage of the English driver. However, we see that Leclerc had a lot of trouble in the first part of the race, but then he managed the tyres very well. Here in this part of the race, the central section, he managed to go strong. In the final part, catching up on Russell, who instead suffered more tyre degradation. Too bad that in the end, he was not able to attack him. Despite trying to minimize the damage, he aimed to keep Leclerc in the lead early and mid-race, then attempt an attack near the end. Despite everything, however, Hamilton's tyre management was superior to that of Leclerc. We also see it from this graph with the difference in lap times with Hamilton, who managed to stay on 36.6 and constant under the 37 wall, while Leclerc has turned with many laps halfway through the race above the 37 wall, so on 37.6, 38.0 even, 38.2 in short. Hamilton managed to remain more constant on slightly lower times, which then went up but more consistently, while Leclerc did a bit more of ups and downs. So Leclerc's tire management is worse than Hamilton's. Let's move on. We also see the difference between Piastri and Norris, which is abyssal. We see the difference, right, between the two drivers, with Norris, who was relegated behind. He couldn't recover, and in fact, you can also see that he was in traffic. Norris managed to run stronger towards the end of the race, but overall, he performed poorly in the sprint. Now, let's analyze the qualifications, where we saw a slightly different scenario. In brief, it also indicates that the track has more rubber from the sprint race. The drivers and teams have changed the setup because I remember that after the sprint race, the Parc Fermé window reopens, and so the setup can be modified again, because the two periods in the race weekend with the sprint race where the setup can be modified is during free practice 1, then after free practice 1 the Parc Fermé is enforced, and then the Parc Fermé is removed again after the sprint race, and before the qualifications the Parc Fermé is put back. So we have seen a driver who modifies the setup, and Ferrari, since it has modified the setup, because guys, it is clearly seen in the telemetry that it has a different behavior, not only in the curve where one could say, damn, the track is more rubber, and so it is there that the behavior is also different of the single-seater, but also on the top speeds. Ferrari had a top speed in today's qualifications less than yesterday's sprint qualifications, so it seems a bit strange. It is not a coincidence, this, and so now we go see the times together. However, we have seen a Ferrari with two faces if we want. We see a strong Ferrari in the sprint race with excellent tire management, a sign that this car still has something of the SF24, because we see that it still manages to handle the tires very well and struggles a bit more instead when it has to express its maximum potential in qualifying. On the other hand, we have seen a Ferrari in qualifying that was not able to be as performant as the opponents, especially in the sections of the track. So in the middle of the curve, Ferrari struggled a bit more than the others to bring more speed in the track and have more mechanical grip of the single-seater. This was a bit of the difficulty of Ferrari, in addition to not being as performant as it showed us yesterday in the straights and as speed of peak. And this is a bit of a problem also for tomorrow's race if we want, because we have seen, therefore, in the qualifications, a great McLaren as we expected, but also a great Mercedes. These are the first three, with the pole position of Piastri, second Russell, and third Norris. And we have also seen a great McLaren that made the pole position with Piastri in 1.36 against the 1.37 of Russell, 1.37 of Norris. Piastri, who also made further, he made the track record in China, beating Hamilton's time from yesterday. The Ferrari's performance was surprisingly worse compared to yesterday's qualifications, despite the track being more rubbery. Although the gap to Hamilton and Leclerc was small, just 2-3 tenths, the close ranking with Filo Antonelli and Giara only 4 tenths behind in 4th and 7th positions respectively, indicates that more was expected from Ferrari in qualifying. Considering that yesterday, however, Ferrari went faster even as lap times with the less rubberized track, it's really strange. In fact, I'll show you a ranking, very interesting, that shows us the difference in times compared to yesterday, how they have improved. From the sprint to normal qualifications, most teams have improved, including Sauber, Red Bull, Alpine, Mercedes, and McLaren, despite their wrong strategy yesterday. However, Ferrari is the only team that has worsened compared to the sprint qualifications, even with a more rubberized track. This is cause for reflection. To see later also in detail why, and I also show you the gaps, the margin between the pole positions of 2025. So in Australia, 84 thousandths, in China, 82 thousandths. So pole, anyway, skimpy. With McLaren, who anyway, even if the car is better, can't bring it home. The pole easily, that is, Russell did a great job. Today we have to give credit obviously to Piastri for the pole, but anyway, Russell did a great qualification. Bringing his Mercedes to second position, Russell is a great driver in qualifying, but still needs to improve on dry laps. In race management and also in the emotional management of the race, he makes a bit too many mistakes from my point of view. We have also seen in past years, and this somewhat compromises him. The standings, even at the end of the year if we want, because these are mistakes that then weigh many points. But speaking of Ferrari, let's do it first. In fact, let's take a look at the complete qualifying standings, and let's also talk about Lawson, because we have to talk about Lawson first, and then we go to see the Tematria and we talk. This is the end of Q1. We see how this ranking, the Q1, so had Norris ahead, but excluded were Gasly, Berman, Dwan, Bortoleto, and Lawson in last position, 20th, 2 qualifiers, that sprint, and today's where Lawson ends in 20th position. Then either there is a curse in the second seat in Red Bull, or it is not explained, because anyway, Verstappen is there in front fighting for the podium and manages to make absurd performances. Very good. Sure, the car is made on Verstappen, but at this moment I see Perez and Tsunoda laughing like this because, guys, seeing a Lawson so far behind, that Lawson is a great driver, guys. He is a great one. They also showed it last year. He managed to put Perez behind in several races. He also put Tsunoda behind, yet he can't keep the car at maximum power because the car is unmanageable. This is a problem because Red Bull, from the moment it has Verstappen, can make it the difference. However, for the constructors change, you need to have a second driver who brings home points, and if they don't have it, it's a big problem. That is, even going forward with the season. So this is the final starting grid for tomorrow's race. In fact, first we see the telemetry so we can see all the times in detail. I make a difference where Ferrari loses, and then we go to make a comment on the starting grid. So this is the difference between Piastri and Hamilton in the qualifying lap. 1.36 of Piastri, 1.39 of Hamilton, and we see that the difference anyway. Ferrari is strong in top speed compared to McLaren, so it has this advantage over McLaren, but look at Hamilton's top speed. It reaches 206 miles per hour. We remember that yesterday it reached 335, 208 miles per hour, so the top speed has been reduced by Ferrari, increasing the load probably more on the single-seater, but Ferrari loses a lot compared to McLaren, despite the car being a bit more efficient, but it loses in the slow curves. Curve 1 loses something to Hamilton. It also loses here in this curve. Let's see here. In all the slow curves, guys, Hamilton loses something compared to McLaren, and also at the last curve, which has been a bit of a weak point for Hamilton all weekend. He also loses here. Looking at the delta times, we see the main differences. In the first sector, Hamilton loses time to Piastri, especially in turns 1-2, where the track is more rubberized, allowing tighter trajectories. In sector 2, Hamilton maintains the gap and even pulls ahead of Piastri. However, he loses time in sector 3, particularly in the final turn, where the gap increases from around 80 thousandths to over 2/10. The last curve is really Hamilton's Achilles heel that he can't bring speed into entry. Let's go. Forward, with the other telemetry, we see Russell Hamilton. Unlike here, we see a Mercedes aiming to have a higher top speed, the one that Ferrari also had yesterday, and still manages to go strong. Mercedes in the slow curves and manage the gap. In fact, we see here curve 1-2 still manages to go strong. Russell to do it better even than Hamilton, and in the second sector loses something in the driven part. However, Hamilton still struggles in the points that we said weak of Ferrari. Ferrari, compared to Mercedes, has a slightly heavier setup, but still manages to perform well in the straights and driven sections of the track. Let's move on against Verstappen and Hamilton. Yesterday there were 18 thousandths of a difference between the two drivers in favor of Hamilton. Today we have about a tenth, 1.38 of Verstappen and 1.39 of Hamilton, and we see that the difference, Verstappen makes it in the stretches. So the top speed of Verstappen is the same as yesterday. He manages to go strong. It's just that it's Ferrari that has decreased its top speed, changing the setup probably after the sprint race. We see that. However, Verstappen struggles a bit more in the slow curves. Those under 100 kmh goes a bit stronger, Hamilton. But in the medium curves anyway, Verstappen manages to go strong. In fact, we see, for example, curve 1-2 as Hamilton loses from Verstappen. While we move forward in the second sector, recovers Hamilton, even remains below here. However, the last curve does it badly. Hamilton, and therefore loses in this case. We see the internal comparison, Hamilton-Leclerc in qualifying with Hamilton, who was still ahead, but Leclerc manages to do some things better. In fact, curve 1-2, that we said was the weak point of Leclerc, manages to do it better in this case compared to Hamilton, and exit from that sequence with 22 thousandths of advantage loses. However, in the second sector, the driven part, Leclerc, where he struggles a lot, arrives at 2/10 and abundant of detachment, and of the part where it is fundamental to also manage the tires, and arriving at the last curve instead, Leclerc manages to do it much better than Hamilton, and therefore to bring to decrease also his detachment, but remains, however, behind Leclerc. So a Ferrari that mainly struggles in the last curve. It's where it falls behind the most, and where we perhaps saw Hamilton also make a small mistake, because he loses to all the drivers, but also in the first sector, particularly curve 1-2, where Hamilton was making a difference yesterday. Today it doesn't make as much of a difference. The track has more rubber on it, allowing tighter trajectories to be maintained. Yesterday there was no grip and the car was sliding, but today it manages to keep the car on track and make a good trajectory. Let's now look at the victory grid for tomorrow, and let's make some considerations. We will see Piastri and Russell in the first row. Then in the second row, Norris and Verstappen. Third row, Hamilton and Leclerc, all Ferrari. So, in my opinion, Ferrari can aim for the podium, guys, with the race. Considering today and tomorrow's races and Hamilton's tire management, third place is achievable. For the top two spots, it depends on if there is a race. Maybe a bit more exciting. Yes, it can be, because overtaking is not easy. In China, drivers are managing tires at overtaking points. Pushing harder means risking not having enough tire at the end, making it challenging. From this point of view, Ferrari has demonstrated a great setup for managing tires today. They changed it after the sprint race, optimizing tire management even further for tomorrow's race. So I see a good Hamilton for tomorrow who can also reach the podium. I see Leclerc a bit more in difficulty this weekend. We'll see. It will be interesting for Norris. You have to aim there in front to try to win. This is his goal, but we'll see if he can achieve it. And Russell is a bit the one who starts further ahead. In my opinion, a bit unexpectedly. If we want to find a Mercedes second, it's really strange. We'll see if he can bring home the podium, but it won't be easy for him. Watch out for Verstappen in part 4th, that he always puts a patch on it. Ocon will start last and has to recover, aiming for at least a top 10 finish with a Red Bull. You can't perform like that. Last note I want to underline up, as I said before, Ajar 7th. Excellent this performance of Ajar. Already in Australia, beyond the race, that unfortunately made a mistake in the lap of training. However, in qualifying, he showed us he can go strong. So great driving by Ajar and Kimi, who consistently places in the top 10. Let's predict how tomorrow's Formula 1 race will go. Share your thoughts on the sprint race and today's qualifications in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any Formula 1 and Ferrari news videos on this channel. Check out related videos from Rastro Tato. See you next time.